Welcome to Crunching Data, where we go behind the scenes with the data leaders who keep it all flowing. We're talking real stories, real challenges, and the future of data from the people building it. This is Crunching Data, a podcast brought to you by Matia, the Unified DataOps platform. Let's get into today's episode.
Hey everyone, this is Benjamin Siegel, co-founder and CEO of Matia, the Unified Data Operation platform, and this is Crunching Data. I'm here today with Jeff Baird, our team. Had a great conversation with Jeff about data platforms and his philosophy, and we knew we had to get him on the podcast. Jeff, it's great to have you on the podcast here with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
To kick things off, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you found yourself in general into data?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been in this space for about 20 years, anything from small, scrappy startups to global enterprises. And how I got into this mess, I guess it reveals a little bit about my character and the way my brain works. I realized that I didn't know enough about computers. I was embarrassingly ignorant on how to use computers back when I was around 20 years old. And so I got a job doing tech support, get thrown in the deep end of the pool, right? And I ended up getting a degree in computer science. So I saw that there was something that I saw as a weakness in me that I wanted to improve, and then dove in head first. And then data in particular I liked because I was a person before, I was a nerd. And I liked that, the business intelligence and data warehousing back then bridged that gap between technology and the business. And I really liked that. I like working with people. And so being able to talk to business stakeholders and finding out what it takes for them to be successful, and then building out data structures, data services that can help them do that was something that appealed to me. And so, I tend to be pretty left-brained, pretty logical. And so it ended up being a nice fit. It's been a great career for me.
It's pretty funny. The people I meet that did the QA / tech support are the smartest people I met because they know the in and out of like real problems and not kind of like surface level problems. So pretty interesting. You came all the way up from tech support, saying you want to go into computer science and getting to where you are today. How does the data team looks like today?
So for my current team, it kind of evolves. I tend to be very focused on business outcomes. It's easy for those of us in technology to debate and discuss different methodologies, different technologies, and that's fun. But I'll also continue to orient myself towards business wins, business outcomes. And so kind of where I'm at right now is moving around within the organization to see where we can produce those business outcomes. Like any organization, there's a lot of challenges. There's silos that have been built up. There's processes or lack of processes that need to be matured. And so it's going in and looking for opportunities where we can move the needle for the business.
Going a bit deeper into the team itself, or like how does success look for the team? How do you track success? Many times with data teams, it's very hard. Similar, I see that also with DevOps. It's very, very hard to measure.
It's a great question that I've pondered and debated over the years. How do we know our data engineers are successful? And there's an irony to that, right? Our whole profession is built around tracking, measuring, and trying to help measure success, right?
We think we are best at it, but sometimes we are not.
Right. It proves to be very, very difficult. And I've got a side interest in psychology, incentives, motivation. And so it's almost a philosophical question too. As soon as you start tracking and measuring something, what behaviors might you be incentivizing? Because then, their career path, their performance is based off of that. And so I don't know if I have a silver bullet on how to measure success for my data engineers. My pie in the sky that isn't always possible, but still strive for, is to try to tie our efforts to business outcomes. And so I'll try, like if I come onto a new project, I'll try really quickly to get some kind of quick win that does impact the business directly and starts to establish trust. And then that gets us off on the right foot as we're starting to build out something that's more long-term scalable. And so I'll orient towards that as much as possible. And so if I'm talking to a marketing team, I'll find out, how do you know if you're successful? Is it watching CPA to make sure you're using your spend appropriately? Or if I'm talking to somebody in sales, that one might be a little more straightforward, right? They're trying to get their sales numbers in. And then I see my job as supporting that, making sure that they have the information to make those kinds of decisions. And so that also means we have to be flexible. It'd be nice if we had one KPI to rule them all, and we could just come in and check to see how our data engineers are doing. It's been more fluid for me. But that also means we can pivot quickly too. We can go to different departments, different teams, and the conversations almost start out the same every time, where we ask them, how do you know you're successful? Where are the blind spots that you wish you had insights into? And then we'll try to give them something that will give them the information they need. And sometimes it's shining a light on things that aren't what they want. It's a problem. I still see that as a win, though, because the problem that you can't see is just going to fester, and it's going to continue to be a problem. A while back, we had an issue with the data connector for one of our marketing sources. There was a nuance with how the ingestion worked with Snowflake, and it was giving silent data quality issues. We weren't getting all the rows ingested, but we didn't know about it. So once we shined a light on that, we were able to fix it and start actually getting correct numbers. And that had an impact of millions of dollars, just having that little silent problem that was in the data. So whether it's a clear business win, a needle that we moved clearly for the business, or it's just shining a light on insights, those are all good in my opinion. It's kind of like any publicity is good publicity. Drawing attention to data, I think, is long-term win. And then trying to find a way to surface that so you can continue to get executive support. I will try to highlight those areas where we have moved the needle and surface those to leadership so that they can see the impact we're having. The trickier ones are the ones behind the scenes. You've got the work to support the offensive nature of the business, where you're trying to move at the speed of business, you're trying to increase sales, you're trying to improve marketing. The unsung hero parts is the defensive stuff, the architecture, the governance. And so I try to be creative, though, to find wins there and show where it does have a downstream impact and connect the dots. I try to make it easy for an executive to say, okay, we invested some time in this. It wasn't just because the tech guys like that kind of stuff. It actually has impact on something like data quality. Data quality is something that I've been passionate about. And so we will sometimes capture metrics around our data quality. A funny one that we used to have, I came into a company that had data pipeline failures probably every week. It was very frequent. There was no trust in the data from the business. And so we did a bunch of stuff behind the scenes that the founders of the company may not understand or care about necessarily. They just wanted to come in, see their report, and trust that it was accurate. And so internally, we had a KPI that was just days since last accident. And if those founders were impacted, if something happened, it didn't matter where upstream, but if their dashboard was impacted, then we'd reset the counter. And so, like I said, it was about every week when we started. But then by the end, we got to 200 some consecutive days without an accident. And that was in a roundabout way still communicating to executives to keep that support that, hey, look, we are having an impact by all the stuff that we're doing behind the scenes. And the end result is you can trust the data and you can trust when you're trying to make decisions.
It's a great metric to follow, because I feel like building trust is one of the hardest things. It's very easy to break, and in the process of building trust, you need to get a lot of small wins. It's the first time I'm hearing about this metric of the days from last incident. Is a pretty cool metric to follow. Like, I feel like if every dashboard had that, you will know that the dashboard is in a very, very good state.
Yeah, and if it's not, then you can fix that too.
Yep, but then your team is jumping on it like right away, because they get a notification that is very accurate to what's need to be done, or very precise. Jumping into your data stack, I think you've been in Databricks, in Snowflake.
Yeah, and I'm doing a little bit of Snowflake still and Databricks. And I like anybody like a good debate on which tool is best for the job. But at the end of the day, it's trying to find the right tool for the job. There's strengths.
I love your definition, because people come and say the right tool, or the great tool, or the best tool, and there is no such a thing, the best. There is a best for a specific thing, yeah.
Right. And that's what's funny with a lot of our debates is it often comes down to just tools were built for different purposes and used cases. So like Snowflake is really good for analytical engineering. It doesn't mean Databricks can't do that really well either. It's just that's kind of where Snowflake's jam is to be able to do data warehousing stuff.
So you said that Databricks can do that, but it's not like that's the bread and butter of Snowflake specific analytics workload.
Databricks is better at something like machine learning because of how it's structured and built under the covers. You can still do that in Snowflake too. It just may not be its jam. So it almost goes back to my earlier point where you find out what the business needs. And rather than getting too tribal with my tools and methodologies, picking what's going to be right for them. My personal bias is I do like Snowflake, but much of that is just bias. But if that's not what the business needs, if they need something that's more machine learning or developer focused, then Databricks. And we can still be totally successful with doing our data warehousing in there too, right? There's not that much of a difference. Now, if you're asking me to do on-prem Oracle or something still, then maybe we'd have more of a discussion.
Very different conversation, yeah. If you were building data stack from scratch today, what is like one thing that you would do differently? It doesn't need to be just the tech stack. It could be, people management or anything that you would do differently.
And I think people is the key thing there for success. There's that old adage that it's people, tools, and processes for success, but who chooses the tools and processes? It's the people. And I've observed over and over and over again that if you have the right people, then you can solve the technological problems. You can figure out the processes. You can figure out the architecture. That stuff is relatively easy now if you get the right people. And that goes both directions. It starts with executive support. I mean, that was something I learned early in my career, that for a data strategy to be successful, you need good executive support. And so leaders that understand the value of data and live it, not just speak it. And then enabling you to build out the right team. That's what I've found the most success because there's a lot of problems we have to solve, but having the right types of people. When I hire, I use the Ideal Team Player. If you've read that book, that's one of my favorites. It's kind of a rough guideline on people to hire that are hungry, humble, and smart. And then things tend to work out after that. We figure it out. Problems will come inevitably, but you get the right dynamics, the right people, then you can figure it out and solve it.
How do you find best talent going by the principle you just shared now?
And the challenge, the short answer is I've consciously and deliberately built up a network of resources. And then if I have a problem that I need to solve, I usually have someone in mind that I can reach out to. That's the short answer. The way the job market works right now has a lot of challenges that AI might just be exacerbating. I've opened up positions, and we're a remote team, so we'll have within a week over 1,000 applicants. And there's applicant tracking systems and things like that to weed through it. But it's easy to miss really good candidates when there's so many, right? And I've seen that as when I've applied for jobs too. If I apply for a job, I'm like, there's 1,000 other people. Good luck getting the resume even looked at by a human. It's just not possible. And so it's actually pretty rare that I hire people through the front door. Unfortunately, I'm probably missing some good candidates. I'll usually try to leverage my network or find people that know. The other benefit that has obviously is that there's only so much you can learn from a round of interviews, and so there is a bit of a gamble when you hire someone. But if you know somebody, can have worked with them, and they're more of a known quantity, it takes some of that risk out. The other thing that some companies don't like this philosophy, but there's kind of this traditional dynamic with job interviews where somebody that's interviewing is supposed to convince the company why they should hire them. Good engineers don't have to do that. The dynamic's almost different. We have to try to persuade them to come.
They have many options. Like if they are that good, they have so many options out there.
Right. And it means maybe they're a little prima donna-ish, but they're worth it. And so you have to make it worth it for them. You have to make the compensation work. You have to be flexible. And the good hires that I've had where I've been able to do that, they get a much bigger return on investment than if I start to skimp, if that makes sense. And it doesn't have to be in huge compensation numbers. These are made up numbers, but you pay someone 20, 30% more, you're going to get more than just 20 to 30% better output. I've found if you can push that envelope a little bit more and have a little bit more flexibility, you'll get huge return on investment from that. It's not uncommon for my people to provide data insights that will save or make additional millions of dollars. It's usually pretty easy for us, as we talked earlier about tying our efforts to business outcomes. We can show our return on investment. So I want to make sure that we're hiring the right talent and then taking care of them. They are in high demand. They have recruiters hitting them up all the time. So let's make sure they're taken care of, have good career trajectories.
Does this mean you invest quite a bit of time on managing the team?
Very much. I'm big on building relationships because I think that's part of it too. I have individuals I've hired three or four different times as I've moved to different places. So I build up good, strong loyalty. My approach to managing too is I hate being a micromanager. If I have to micromanage, I probably don't have the right hires. And so my role changes a bit. It's more making sure that there aren't roadblocks in their way of kicking ass. Like if I can just clear their path so they can do what they do best, and if I can represent them to stakeholders and to executive support to highlight their wins and to get them the support that they need. And then within the team itself, it's usually not very top down. It's usually pretty flat in terms of our team. We consult, we talk, we brainstorm. I try to foster an environment where it's safe to bring up any and all ideas. It's safe to fail, so that we can come up with new and creative and better ways of doing everything. And then kind of an end goal is if I can make myself more or less superfluous in that role. Does a good engineer really need someone managing them, or do they just need kind of that North Star and the guiding principles? I can make myself superfluous and then move on to the next challenge or opportunity, whether it's within the company or somewhere else, then I like that. For me, that's a success.
I guess last question on leadership and team building. Many people are starting as new data leaders. Sometimes it's a new business. Sometimes it's things collapse and they're alone and they need to lead the data strategy and hire. I'm wondering one recommendation you would give someone that it's the first time they're doing it.
For new data leaders specifically? Yep. Don't underestimate the importance of relationships. Building the relationships of trust, which is even more difficult if you're remote, but having the relationships with stakeholders, with executives, with your team, oftentimes that's more of an afterthought. We don't pay as much attention to that. Nothing will kill productivity like a toxic environment or lack of trust. And with remote, it is more difficult, but doing what you can, and where you can meet people in person, even if it's for a short amount of time. We had one person in one of the departments a while back who, when I came in, there was some trust issues between the data team and their team. And so we were building out something that was going to be more sustainable, more scalable, and it was working all right, but there was still that kind of underlying friction that was still there from before I got there. And what ended up turning it around wasn't me explaining all my reasons why we're doing it. It wasn't actually the facts and data, as much as we'd like to think that our data persuades and influences. It was when that individual was able to come out here and we go to dinner and we talk and we connect. And after that, it clicked for him. Our strategy hadn't changed, but that relationship was enough that he was more open to it, and he could step back. We all have our bias, of course, right? He could step back from that a little bit and look at it hopefully a little more objectively, and me myself too, to understand his perspective better and not get too locked into my own bias. But what broke those walls down was spending time with the person. And so I think that would pay dividends on your data strategy, because then when you need the technical support, when you need to propose the new tool, you'll have a much better chance of getting what you need.
When we talked, you shared how much you believe in unification of data and how platforms are becoming more platformized. My question is, how do you feel about this whole idea of unification and having multiple things in one place? You were talking about data observability, data quality, governance.
And there's a lot of different directions we could go with that. And there's trying to centralize under one umbrella, like all Microsoft, as an example, or picking the best of breed. And I think most people would agree you don't want too far in extremes on either end, that it's a spectrum. If you consolidate, unify too much, then, jack of all trades, master of none. Spread yourself too thin. Yes, it's easier for cost management and governance and things like that, but then you're losing flexibility, especially if it becomes too rigid to where it's losing sight of what business actually needs. But if you go too far the other direction, then you do have chaos in your architecture. You have spaghetti architecture. It's difficult to manage governance. It's difficult to define ownership. And so I think everybody's trying to find that sweet spot, that balance in the middle. And so if we can remind ourselves that we really want the same thing, we really want the balance of the best two worlds. And then I'm a bit of a broken record, but letting the business requirements ultimately drive that decision. I tend to be a little bit more best of breed. So going back to what I've said before, listening to the business and not necessarily making the decision that we want just because we like technology, but to support the business. Because after all, that's really why we're there, right? We're not there just to create a pretty dashboard. We're there to make sure the right information is given to the right people at the right time. And so I think that's good for those of us that get excited about new shiny tech to be reminded of every now and then to keep that focus and make your decisions based on that, if that makes sense, while balancing all the technical stuff, the data governance and things like that are also necessary.
I agree. I guess my last question is, what is your most controversial or spicy take in the data world today?
The one top of mind, so AI is hot. Somewhat related to that is the topic of data modeling. I came from the world where it actually mattered if you did a star schema, to minimize joins. And
people underestimate those, right? Like they use a star schema and then they ask why the AI doesn't understand what column are within that star schema versus,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So data modeling, especially if you're talking to someone in sales or marketing when they have a product that is supposed to make data engineering or data modeling no longer needed. So I'm still a proponent of good data modeling, not as an antiquated dogmatic approach to data modeling, but if you look at the principles that existed there, many of them still apply. And if you look at the grain of a fact table, if you were to join that to a different fact table of different grain, you're going to run into problems with your metrics. That's true regardless of what your underlying data model is. And so that's where I become pragmatic, is to identify what those core principles are and the reasons why they were there, and see if it still applies, because many times it does. And so I'm still a proponent of doing conceptual data modeling, logical data models, and I'm still a fan of almost like a Kimball light. It doesn't have to be dogmatic because, again, things have changed and evolved, but things that are organized around a core business process and that have naming conventions that are intuitive to the business, and or something like a wide table. And the nice thing is then that should be easier for AI as you're making more meaningful table and column names and you're adding notes. You can add columns that can give additional information to AI. Then it's going to make it easier on the business, and I think it's going to make it easier when you start trying to put something like natural language querying on top of your data. But yeah, whether or not the data model is Ralph Kimball and data warehousing dead, maybe not quite.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to have this debate for the long term. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Crunching Data, brought to you by Matia, the unified DataOps platform. You can find us at matia.io.